Thank you all for joining me tonight. Well, it's evening around here. I don't know where everybody else is, but it is a good night to be tasting some wine, and it's a good time to be talking about some of these interesting things. So yeah, as Haven said, I'm Sandy Strick, and I'm in the School of Hotel, Restaurant, and Tourism, where I teach a lot of the wine classes, as well as some teaching pedagogy and other sorts of things. We have quite a crowd today, and we're really excited to be doing this. So this is going to make it really fun. Here's what we thought we would do. We thought that we would do a little PowerPoint so that you can kind of see what we're talking about, take a look at the wines, take a look at the region that the wines came from, a little bit about the winemaker, and then we would all taste the wines together. So that's kind of the plan. Of course, I need to get on the right, I need to get on the right screen, and then we will get started. So yeah, Dana lives in Napa. Maybe it's a little bit of a challenge to get her internet up and running. So we'll just kind of carry on, and she will tune in as soon as she can. Anyway, you don't have audio and you don't have any video, so they're not on for you, but the chat is. So when Dana pops in, between the two of us, we're hoping that we can answer your questions. We're hoping that you ask questions. So it's a little hard to gauge exactly what is too much information and what is not enough information. So for instance, if you want to know how to taste wine, please ask. Otherwise, we can't tell exactly what is in the best interest of the group. Yes, this is being recorded. Haven has told me that the Alumni Association records these. So if you need a copy of this, you're certainly welcome to it. If we don't get to your questions by for some reason or other, because we're overwhelmed with questions, our emails are at the end of this PowerPoint, and you are welcome to send us an email, and we'll do our best to figure out the answers to your questions. So yeah, here we go. We have an hour to do this, so I guess we should get started. So here's what we're going to do. We are going to go in this order. We're going to taste the Prosecco first, then the Chapoutier Rosé, and then we'll do a Pinot Gris tasting, whichever wine you happen to get. Then we'll do Sauvignon Blanc, and we'll end with the Pinot Noir. If you didn't get all of these, that's fine. If you got some of them, that's great. If you didn't get any of them and you're just tuning in to listen, welcome as well. All of those things are good reasons to be here. We picked these wines for a couple of reasons. One, it is summertime, and I don't know where everybody is, but here in Colombia, it's 9,500 degrees today. It really is 95 degrees, and we've had a couple of pop-up showers where I am here in Blythewood, so the humidity level is higher than the temperature, and I can't even imagine drinking something big and heavy in this kind of weather. So we picked wines for summertime, for warm weather, for light food, or actually for no food, a great sunset. All of those work for wines that are light and summery. We also picked these wines because we were trying to stick within the $20 or under price range. Hopefully we did that for the most part. Not exactly sure where everybody found their wines, but hopefully we got a pretty good, pretty close to that. So that was the second reason that we picked these wines. And the third reason is we wanted wines that were easily available. So we picked wines that you could hopefully find in your local grocery stores or your local wine shops. So with that in mind, we're going to take you a bit around the world with these wines. And the first one up, if you haven't opened your wines, please go ahead and do that. So as we go through them, you're not trying to figure that out. And lucky for us, most of them are twist tops. So should not be hard to open these wines. Maybe the first one, the Prosecco, is going to be the most challenging. So first wine is Prosecco. This is LAMARCA Prosecco, and LAMARCA Prosecco is interesting for a couple of reasons. First of all, it is actually an umbrella brand And this umbrella brand is 9 separate wineries that all grow the same grape and are in the same region of Italy, but each of them has a little bit different style. And so these 9 wineries decided to get together and make a wine that would be unique, that none of them could do by themselves. By doing this, they were managing costs very carefully and really creating something that no other Prosecco could manage to do. So the other thing about Prosecco is that it's really an interesting and unique story. This wine, Prosecco in general, 10 years ago, very few people had ever heard of it. It was just a little local wine that the locals would drink during happy hour, and that was pretty much the extent of it. And it has gone from that to the most popular sparkling wine in the world. So yeah, the most popular sparkling wine in the world for a lot of reasons. The name of the grape that they use to make Prosecco is GLERA. GLERA is kind of a greenish grape, and it only really thrives in this particular part of Italy. So you can see where Prosecco comes from. It comes from this region known as the Veneto, which is the 8th largest region in Italy, by the way, 8 out of 20. And it, you may not have heard of Veneto, but certainly you've heard of Venice. So Venice is in this region. And by law in Italy, in order to make Prosecco, you need to use the GLERA grape, and you need to make it in this region only. So kind of unique and kind of fun, since it's kind of up in the foothills of northern Italy. There are some lovely rolling hills, which makes for great grape growing. Say that time, it's fast. So they grow the grapes on the slopes, which gives them great sun exposure, and it gives them great drainage, so the grapes aren't sitting in water. And if they were to grow the grapes in the flatlands and the valleys, there wouldn't be much sun, and it would be a lot of water down there. So they stress the grapes by putting them on the slopes, and the stressed grapes are really very good for making a real quality wine. Gives it some great acidity and some great fruits. I don't want to give you too much because I want you to taste it for yourself. And then we can talk about what the wine tastes like. But yeah, so Prosecco is unique to this region. The other thing I wanted to tell you about Prosecco is how it's different from Champagne. You know, for all these years, Champagne was the #1 sparkling wine in the world. And Champagne, as many of you know, has to come from the Champagne region in France. And when they make Champagne, they ferment a wine, and they put that fermented wine in a bottle, and then they add some sugar and they add some yeast right into the bottle, and they let the wine ferment a second time in the bottle. When they do that, it takes anywhere from a year to 3 years to make a good champagne. And so it is quite a time-consuming process. Hi, Dana. They store these bottles in underground cellars, so it takes, they can't sell the wine right away. They have to store it. They have to preserve it. All of those things takes time and money. When they make Prosecco, they do it a little bit differently. They still make a still wine just like they did for the other wine, but instead of putting it in a bottle, they put the wine in a second fermentation tank. And in that second fermentation tank, then they add some sugar and some yeast, and they let the second fermentation take place in the tank. By doing that, they have a whole different style of sparkling wine that's a result. This wine is ready in about 3 months. It is fresh, and it's got lots of aromatics and lots of fresh fruit to it, whereas the Champagne would have toasty, oaky, bready kind of notes known as brioche in Champagne. And in a Prosecco, you're going to have things that are more fresh and more lively. And as you might also imagine, 3 months compared to a couple of years definitely cuts down on the cost. So Prosecco can get to the market much quicker, and it just creates a whole different sort of sparkling wine. Having said all of that, I think it's time for us to taste some. I'm getting thirsty, and I'm sure everybody else is too. So let's go to the Prosecco. Mine is the LAMARCA, and pour yourself some, and let's see what you all think about this wine. I'd love for you to, in your chat, to tell us what you're thinking. So, you know, what are you getting from this? We can certainly tell you what we're getting, but it'd be much more fun if you would maybe give us some thoughts about this sparkling wine. What are you getting, Dana? Dana, is your audio on? What do you think of this? Do you like it? Do you, don't think of it as champagne, think of it as something that is a sparkling wine for a completely different occasion. Any thoughts? Dana, what do you think? I don't think Dana's audio is on. Dana?
I don't think she can hear you right now.
No.
We're trying to get her figured out.
Okay, thanks for sticking with us on this, you guys. So, Prosecco. There you go, yay. Hi, Dana.
Hi, everybody.
Just a second to introduce my partner in crime here. This is Dana Bergen. She's amazing. She graduated from our program with her master's degree in 2013, and I have missed her ever since. She has gone on to do some really great things, and she landed in Napa Valley, of all wonderful places, and that's where she is now. Look at that. Is that for real behind you, or is that?
Yes, it is. I am actually in the library room at Raymond Vineyards, and these are our library selections behind us. So I'm at work.
Isn't it wonderful when the people that you know graduate and go on to do such amazing things, which, by the way, there's a lot of graduates on this chat here that are also doing some really great things, really great. So Dana, talk about this for a sec.
Where are we on?
We're in the Prosecco. You want to give any thoughts?
So I didn't hear anything that you said prior to that. Sorry for all the technical difficulties, but Prosecco is one of my favorite wines because it's so approachable. It's your everyday sparkling. You can grab this on a random Tuesday just because it's a Tuesday and I feel like it. And it pairs well with everything. A sunny afternoon, just as well as appetizers on the deck. So yes, it's one of my faves. So thank you for choosing this one.
Yay. Hope you all are enjoying that. I see some great light, sparkling, refreshing kind of comments. I think that's exactly what the intention of Prosecco is.
Yes.
Yeah, exactly. Okay, good. Notice the bubbles are nothing like they would be in a champagne. That's not their intention at all. I guess I've made that point. Okay, so in order to get through all of these in an hour, I think we have to move on. So we will, come on. So the next one is Chapoutier Cote de Rhone Rosé. I am a Rosé fan. I don't know who else out there is a Rosé fan, but I think it's often a sadly misunderstood wine. I think when people see the pink wine, they think it's supposed to be sweet, and it can be sweet, but it doesn't have to be. And I think that we need to appreciate it for, again, the same purposes that we were talking about. It's light, refreshing on a hot summer day. This is a great wine. So Chapoutier in general is one of two probably major producers of wine in the Rhone Valley. Gigal is the other one. that we see often. So a major player in the Rhone Valley wine conversation, highly respected. The family has been making wine in this region since the mid 1800s, and they make all different kinds of wines. So they will make your everyday kind of approachable wines, and they will make wines like Hermitage, which is their high-end wine. They grow some grapes on their own estate, and they also blend grapes from a variety of places around the Rhone. So that's known as négociant. So they will either do their own, or they will act as a blender of wines from many different places. Isn't that a cute picture? You gotta love this guy. Michel Chapoutier is the guy who is the winemaker. This is his family. Yes, it is. And I just think he's got this look on his face like, what can I do next? Something interesting. One of the things that he did do that is very unique for wine labels is he put Braille on all of his labels. So those of you that have this Chapoutier with you, if you run your finger over it, you'll notice that there's Braille. No other wine labels do that. There's a lot of stories as to why that Braille is there. One was a nephew was blind. One was his mother was blind. One was there was a music teacher that was blind, and he wanted to make sure that he could get some wines. So whatever the story is, it makes for another unique characteristic of this Cote de Rhone Rosé. So where is the Rhone Valley anyway? Rhone is in Italy, in France. It is in the southeast quadrant of France, right above Provence. And as you'll see here, it follows the Rhone River, which is very common for a lot of wine regions. The river just provides a lot of good things as far as climate, and of course, as far as irrigation and all that. So it's very common. If you look at these other regions, you'll see there a lot of them are following rivers as well. So the Rhone Valley is actually divided into two parts. So there's the Northern Rhone, and then there's the Southern Rhone. This wine comes from the Southern Rhone, where it is mostly Grenache. This rosé is 75% Grenache, with some Syrah and Cinsault as major blenders, and then there are some other minor grapes that also are blending grapes in this wine. It is, if you'll notice on this map, there's a small region called Tavel, which is right by Avignon. Tavel is the only region in the world that only makes rosé wine. So if you are lucky enough to visit Tavel, you will find nothing else on their shelves, nothing else in their tasting rooms except rosé. And so it should be no surprise that a good rosé from another producer would come from this same region. What else about the Rhone? Well, this is the Rhone Valley. I just couldn't help but show you these pictures. So the valley, if you look at the picture on the left, the river is actually down in there, in that valley. You just can't see it. It's because the slopes are so monumental that you really can't see them. But what's interesting about Rhone is that they've had to literally stair step the slopes, the mountains, to grow the grapes. So the vineyards are on these steps that they've cut literally out of the mountains. Who thought of that? The Romans did, I think, back in the day when they were the ones that were leading the charge for planting grapes. And often they planted grapevines in places where nothing else would grow, and clearly nothing else was going to grow there. So they planted grapevines, and still to this day, this is what Rhone looks like. As you might imagine, you can't mechanically harvest. Everything has to be hand-picked. In fact, I think they literally handpick and put the bags on the backs of donkeys to lead them down to the wineries, because there is no other way to harvest the grapes from this region. So Rhone is, if you want to think that slopes are good for grapes because they allow good drainage, you can see why the Rhone Valley would be really good in that regard. The other thing, one more picture about Rhone. I just think it's a really fascinating place. This is Southern Rhone. Doesn't look like a nice fertile farm that we ever see. Certainly doesn't look like the lovely vineyards in the Napa Valley where Dana is, or in many places that y'all have been. So Southern Rhone, these rocks are as big as your hand, and they are called puddle stones or galette in French. And they are not just surface rocks. They are down 6 feet deep into the earth, these gigantic rocks. And again, who thinks that that's a good place to plant a vine? So the vines look kind of gnarly and sort of short. And that would be one reason because of the rocks. But the other reason is because of the Mistral wind. So the Mistral is a wind that comes through the Alps and swoops down through France, cuts through the Rhone into Provence and then out to the Mediterranean Sea. And it's about 300 days a year of blustery weather. And because of that, they cannot trellis the grapevines up high. If they did, the grapes would get blown off. So they keep the grapevines low, and that also accounts for some of this gnarliness. And the third reason we have this gnarliness is because often these are very old vines. Rhone is known for having vines that are up to 100 years old, which means they don't necessarily produce much, but they get these really thick, gnarly tree trunk looking vines that go along with them. So that is the Rhone. I think that it's time for us to taste the next wine. So let's stop sharing and let's taste some of this beautiful rosé wine from Chapoutier in the Rhone Valley. Remember, it's 75% Grenache. It has this beautiful color to it and some really, really great nose on it. Anybody have any comments that you'd like to share? Dana, what are you getting?
French rosés are some of my favorites, and I get peach and a lot of bright strawberry, a little bit of cherry. There's a touch of herbaceousness, like possibly basil or some kind of an herb in there.
Well, you know, in the Rhone, there's a lot of wild rosemary and a lot of wild lavender. So maybe not the lavender, but you might be getting the some of that rosemary. That might be what you're referring to. It just grows wild. When you get out of your car, that's what you smell in the air. Crazy. It's lovely.
Yes, yes. So I always think that rosé is, or I say that a rosé is a red wine I can drink in the summer because I love red wines, but they're just too heavy in the summer. So I always pick a rosé, and this is actually one of my favorites. So thank you for going old world for me on this.
Yay. So everybody might not know that these are actually red grapes that we ferment, and we just leave the skins in the fermentation tank for a short time. And then we remove the skins, and so therefore we're removing any more pigment that would have gotten into the wine, and that's what gives it this lovely blush color. So for those of you that were thinking it had to be sweet, I hope that we have maybe shown you that a rosé can be a dry wine, and this would be a great example of that.
I don't know that I've ever actually had a sweet rosé from France.
Yeah, probably not. Those would be more likely to come from US.
Or yeah, New World.
Yeah.
So lovely.
So I see a couple of people couldn't find this wine. I'm surprised, only because I thought it was pretty widely available. So apologies for that. Anything else we need to answer before we move on? Oh yeah, some of the best rosés are from Tavel. Tavel, it's called Tavel, absolutely. Just go look for that. It's in a tall, slender bottle. And you can find it in a lot of places. They do so many great studies with regard to rosé wines in the Tabel region. In fact, you can go there and do a program where they'll pour all the wines into black glasses. So you can't really tell what the color of the wine is, because some people look at this and they think sweet. So by totally getting rid of the idea of looking at the color, they have really been able to get people to think about what some of the characteristics of the wine are without saying, okay, I see this, so it must be strawberry and it must be cherry or that sort of thing. It's a really interesting place to go if you ever get the opportunity. All right. Whew, I think we're breezing through these really quickly. I hope that everybody is having a good time enjoying these wines. Cheers on that one. Okay, what's next, Dana?
I believe we have the Pinot Gris from either Willakenzie or the Willamette Valley, I believe.
Exactly. So Pinot Gris. So we've now spent a little bit of time in the old world, known as Europe, to the most wine people. Now we're coming back to the new world, and we have two Pinot Gris choices. We have Willakenzie Estates and we have the Willamette Valley. Hopefully one or the other of these would be a little bit easier for you to find. I think there's a little bit of a price point difference, so maybe that made a difference. But I want to talk about both of these, and then we'll taste together whichever one you have. So the Willakenzie, or in general, Pinot Gris is a very important grape in Oregon. It is, by some accounts, their most important grape. It grows very well in that region and produces some really outstanding examples of Pinot Gris. So in Oregon, there's a law, and the law says that they have to call this grape Pinot Gris. They cannot call it Pinot Grigio. It's the same grape. In Italy, they would call it Pinot Grigio. But in Oregon, they had decided that perhaps Pinot Grigio had gotten a bad reputation. Whether or not that's true is kind of up to you. But they had decided that they didn't want to be part of that conversation. So they just simply made a law that they were going to call it Pinot Gris, which is how they call this grape in France. So trying to emulate the Alsatian style, they try very hard to stick with the style of wine that the Alsatians think is best for this particular type of grape, if that makes any sense to everybody. So Willakenzie in particular is owned by a family, or started by a French family, interestingly enough, and they had a French winemaker for a long time. In fact, they've got the fleur-de-lis on their label there, sort of as homage to their French founder. Today they have a winemaker whose name is Eric Crema. Eric was from Florida, and he got his undergraduate degree there and actually studied petrochemical engineering. So he did that for a while, and then he got a hankering to go visit New Zealand. So he went to New Zealand and found himself in enology school there, learning how to make wine at the master's level. And then he stayed in New Zealand for a while and made wine there. So anyway, he's on his second career, and he is the main winemaker at the Willakenzie Estates. Willakenzie gets its name in particular from the sedimentary soil that this winery is on. The Willamette Valley Vineyards Pinot Gris is also from Oregon. Same story about the Pinot Gris grape. This wine, interestingly enough, was made by a guy by the name of Jim Burnaugh, and Jim is here. Jim is the founder, and he's the wine grower for this wine. He's from Oregon. He graduated undergrad and decided he wanted to try making wine. This is like a common story, huh? Anyway, so he didn't have any money, and he didn't have a winery, And in fact, he didn't have a license to make wine because in Oregon, there's only so many licenses that are issued, and they were all issued. So he was really barking up the wrong tree. Anyway, he found this little lean-to building outside of Salem, Oregon, that had absolutely nothing going for it except that it had a license attached to it. So he bought the property so we could get to the license, and he started right away with public shares. So he has always been the guy that has traded publicly, although he retains control. Still to this day, you can buy shares of Willamette Valley, Estates wines. So anyway, he's a really ambitious guy. He started with this little nothing property outside of Salem to now being, 30 years later, one of the largest landowners in the Willamette Valley. A pretty great story. Both of these guys, Eric and Jim, agree that if they could move away from Pinot Gris, they would. They would like to grow something like Chardonnay that is a little bit more lucrative. You can charge a higher price tag for Chardonnay than you can for Pinot Gris, but the public won't let them. They really are enjoying that. The sales are too good, so that even though they might want to try something else, their bread and butter comes from the Pinot Gris. In Willamette Valley, the soils are clay. So very different wine style from the sedimentary soil to the clay soil of this wine. Both of these wineries are in the Willamette Valley. As you can see, it is in the northwestern part of Oregon. It just borders on Washington and very close to Portland. And yeah, so cool climate, lots of interesting options for grapes that ripen quickly. It just gets too cold for grapes that have to stay on the vine for too long a period of time. I think that these wines are both interesting. I think if you had the opportunity to compare them one to the other, you would find it very interesting that two wines from the same region can have very different soils and taste really completely different from each other. What you got, Dana?
Well,
let's pour this one.
Yes, please. Which one do you have, Dr. Strick? Do you have the Willakenzie or the Willamette Valley?
Oh, ye of little faith. Are you kidding me?
You have both?
One of the advantages.
Definitely.
Which one do you have?
I have the Willakenzie Estate.
Excellent. Then I'll do the other one.
Awesome.
Okay, so Willakenzie with that crazy soil, the sedimentary soil to it. What you got?
Oh, it's very mineralistic, very very bright. I get pear and a little bit of melon, and some citrus on this. And if I really dig deep, there's a little honey in the background.
Nice.
What do you get?
So this one, I think, is probably not as bright as yours. I think the clay soil is going to round things out a little bit. So it's just a little more toned down in terms of maybe some of that over-the-top brightness that you might get in that wine. It's got a lot of, I think, a lot of citrus in it and a lot of tree fruits. So we're talking about, like, you know, pear and maybe some apple in there. And maybe there's a little bit of that same honey that you were talking about. I think that's characteristic of Pinot Gris. And if we think about what they would do in Alsace, I think they would come up with those same sorts of goals for their wine.
Right.
Yeah. All right, let me get out of this so we can see if there's any questions. Huh? Stop sharing. Got to get used to this. Ah. Oh, somebody has a few shares. Ha. Love in the Willamette Valley. Okay, nice. You can get the Willamette Valley at Costco.
No.
Good.
There is no difference between Pinot Gris and Pinot Grigio. They're actually the same grape, so it's just semantics.
Right. And right, semantics and maybe an image. Or at
True.
least that's what the people in Oregon think, is that there's an image difference.
Or approachability.
Or approachability. Fair enough. Mm.
Yeah, that is lovely.
That is really lovely. What would you put this with?
I was just thinking about that. I might try salmon, although I think salmon would go better with the next wine we're going to have. Just a light fish or even a salad.
There you go.
With a creamy dressing, not necessarily a vinaigrette.
People don't know what a great cook you are, that you would be like thinking about all these things. And I guess I won't share that. Sorry.
If I'm not thinking about wine, I'm thinking about food. You know me.
There you go. Hey, they go together every time. Every time. So
Yes,
which of the two Pinot Gris do you prefer? I think they're just a little bit different from each other.
Yep.
That's what I would say. That I don't know if there's a preference. It's just, they're just a little bit different style.
True, and based on availability, if I can pick one or the other, either one are good. So if I can find the Willamette Valley and the other one isn't available, it's a great pick. It's a great choice.
Can we see the color? The map is what? Oh, hopefully I fixed that. Very mild. Yes, ma'am, it is. Oh, how about with grilled scallops?
Oh, beautiful. Yes. Any light fish like that has very little sauce, and even just like a light vegetable side on like side dish. My suggestion.
Yum. Yay. Okay, moving right along.
Hey.
The whirlwind tasting that we're doing. Okay. Yep. I hope this isn't too fast for everyone. Hello, Emilio. So the next one, oh my gosh, check out the label. Check out the label on that. If you cannot miss this one in the store.
Yeah.
I think that was in part their intention, was so that when you saw this one, you knew right away. So Matua, back across the world again. This time we're going across and south to New Zealand. So Matua Sauvignon Blanc. So many great, interesting things to say about this wine and this grape from this region. So these two dudes, let me introduce you to Ross and Bill Spence. These guys, in 1974, got an idea that they wanted to try making wine. No experience, no family background, no history of it for, centuries, none of that sort of stuff. They just got this idea that they wanted to try making wine, and they wanted to try making Sauvignon Blanc of all things. In 1974, that was unheard of in New Zealand. They just thought, why not? We're going to try something weird. Let's go for it all the way. We have the kind of climate that this should work in. And guess what? So successful. New Zealand Sauvignon Blanc is now a benchmark. So while we talk about wines from Bordeaux and wines from Burgundy being benchmark, in their categories, a Burgundy Pinot Noir is like what all the other Pinot Noir makers want to be like, supposedly. And same thing with Cabernet Sauvignon in Bordeaux and on and on. In the old days, they would have tried to benchmark the Sauvignon Blanc also from Bordeaux. But since this style of Sauvignon Blanc has come on the market, there's been a big switch, and no longer are they trying to emulate the French, but they're actually trying to emulate the New Zealanders, which is quite a statement, I think. So these guys decided to give it a try, still in charge of the winery all these years later, and have created something that is really unique and different. Now it is a style that is copied around the world. So New Zealand has a lot of well, let me start with this. Sorry about that. So New Zealand has two islands, the North Island and the South Island. And this wine comes from Marlborough, which is on the north part of the South Island. I don't know if anybody's been to New Zealand. I think a few of you have that I know. I have not been there, but I do know that it is not exactly lovely farm climate. So it's got its moments, but it is challenging at best. And that honestly is what makes grape growing there so wonderful, is that it has a unique climate that really takes these grapes and makes them so much different. So here are some pictures of this beautiful countryside, much more flat land where they can grow these grapes without having them sit in the valley with a lot of water. That's to their advantage. Here's another picture of the Marlborough region. Just beautiful there. That's definitely on my bucket list. I'm going to try to make it there one of these days. But New Zealand also has a lot of indigenous folks there. So there is the Maori culture is a very alive and well and dominant culture in New Zealand, particularly in the Southern Island. And so these two gentlemen, Bill and Ross, decided to pay homage to the heritage of this indigenous tribe. And so they chose as their label this tattoo that typically the Maori people put on their faces, believe it or not. It's called tamoka, and Maori itself actually translates to head of the family. So they were trying to sort of make the statement that they were being the leaders in Sauvignon Blanc from New Zealand. That kind of translated into the head of the family idea. And so that's where that came from. It is like some of these other wines. It has a twist top to it. I think all but two of the wines that we talked about today have twist tops. Just let it be known that in New Zealand, they don't put corks in their bottles ever unless it's a very high-end wine. They didn't come up through the times when cork was important. And so twist top is what it is. Same in Australia. And actually, the French even got into twist tops, which I meant to mention that when we were drinking the Rosé, but yep, time for changes is good. And the New Zealanders got this one correct. So let's go taste this one. Shall we?
While we're on the subject of corks, actually, did you know 7 to 10% of all wine with a cork in it is actually corked, which means it has TCA, what is it, 3, 4, 6? It's cork taint. And there's nothing, it won't hurt you. It's just what it does, it affects the flavor of the wines. Sometimes makes the flavors muted. And so you could get a bottle of wine and like, wow, I really didn't like that, and have another bottle of the same vintage and it tastes completely different. Could be corked. So the screw cap closures actually alleviates that risk. So it's not a quality issue at all or a quality indicator. It just basically means that your wine will not be corked. So just FYI.
Yay. So Matua, Sauvignon Blanc. This is a very unique style. I'm interested to hear what the group has to say about this one, because I think, yeah, just interested to hear. I'm not going to give it away what I think. Nobody's saying anything.
They're all drinking.
Oh. I like this wine.
I do too.
Let's see, what else we got? One of my favorite wines. Yeah, so this.
Oh, here they come in.
There we go. Just took a minute. It's what I expect. Yep, you're right. Not a fan. Okay, Nancy. That's why they make 31 flavors. If we all like the same thing, you know,
Definitely.
how boring would that be? 2 fans, 1 non-fan. Okay. Love it. So this is kind of a style that you have to not everybody's a fan of this. I'm totally not surprised to see these results. Are you?
No, not at all.
Yeah. So Sauvignon Blanc, you know, when I teach my intro class to the undergrads, this is the one they all turn their nose up at. They just don't, it's not something that you necessarily like right away. But word of warning to everybody, put this with a little bit of food and it changes completely. And so
yes.
What happens to a lot of the students is when I ask them to pair some foods with this wine, they get a completely different experience. And so if you have some wine left over after this and you have some food, you might want to give that a try.
Specifically olives or even nuts or something with a little bit of an oily, unctuous kind of character to it, it's going to change this completely. So if it was me, I would take a sip of the wine, try some of the food, and then go back to the wine and see how it changes.
Good idea. Shrimp Creole last week. Okay, Glenna. What are you tasting here?
Grapefruit and lime rind hits me right in the face. Very bright acidity. It cleanly washes down the palate.
Yeah, right. So somebody asked about cheese. There's a couple of questions about cheese here. I can see why that would be a good question, right? Because this would cut through all that creaminess and it would cut through all of that rich cheese.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So
yes.
What cheese would you recommend?
Oh, I actually would probably do a little bit of a menagerie of a soft cheese, a semi-hard cheese, and a hard cheese just to see how it changed. Possibly a goat cheese with no herb, because it's got enough herbaceousness in it as it is. Maybe a mediocre cheese like what is this cheese from Spain? I'm not going to think of it anyway. They're just kind of a medium soft cheese, and then you could go Parmesan, but I think that's a little too pungent. Try your favorite cheeses.
Manchego. Yep, that's it.
Manchego. Thank you. Yes, that's what it was. And yes, I get a lot of citrus rind on this, specifically grapefruit, but also there's some lime in it too.
A mild hop flavor. That's interesting. So you know what? Hops have a lot of citrus in them.
They do.
Some hops do. So maybe that is the connection.
Yep.
Definitely taste the grapefruit. So if this is not your favorite style, I would suggest, if you're still interested in exploring Sauvignon Blanc, go for the French style. Go for a one from Bordeaux, which is going to be a completely different style than this, and you might find that more to your liking. I think this is the one that, yeah, you expect to kind of get a little wider divide.
Yes. But because I mean, everybody's palate is different and there's no wrong answers.
Exactly. All right, so we got one more to go. Thank you all for being so kind about just hanging in there with us. This is yeah, probably ambitious of us to do 5 in an hour, but we'll talk to Haven about doing one that's less ambitious maybe another time. Okay, so looked at all of these. Sorry, you can tell this is not my forte here. So the last one is the only red that we put into the mix. We thought that it would be light enough that it would still fit a lot of the conversations. Often Pinot Noir and Chardonnay are interchanged. If people really like reds better than whites, they might go for a Pinot Noir. And if they really like whites better than a reds, they might go for Chardonnay for the same purposes. So these wines are both made by the same producer, La Crema. In fact, they're both made by the same winemaker. They just come from 2 different regions from California. La Crema has been making wine in California since about the 80s, and they have really perfected several different styles of Pinot Noir. So one comes from Sonoma and one comes from Monterey. This is Jen Walsh. She is the winemaker. Yay! We had to have a whole variety of folks to represent as part of our conversation. So she's it. So Jen comes from Baltimore, of all places, and went to school in Pittsburgh and got an opportunity to go to Burgundy on some kind of a scholarship and fell in love with these Burgundian Pinot Noirs. The scholarship was in winemaking, and she stayed there and learned to make wine the Burgundian way, and really got a passion for these cool climate kinds of winemaking techniques, and came back and ultimately found herself at La Crema, where their philosophy of winemaking is to use the Burgundian winemaking techniques in conjunction with contemporary California styles. So it kind of fit exactly what she thought wine should be about, and she has been there ever since. At La Crema, they cold soak their Pinot Noir, which means it gets a really bright color to it. Hopefully you'll see that in this wine that you pour. Cold soaking preserves a lot of the aromatics of the wine, and that was a lot of her intention. So for our last wine, we have gone to California, and we find ourselves in Sonoma, which is right next to Napa Valley, if you can find that one, right next to where Dana is. And the other is from Monterey, which is a little bit further south. Both are on the coast, but you could expect, if you were to compare these two wines just by looking at the map, that the warmer climate is going to produce a little different characteristics in the wine than the one that's from Sonoma. So we find that certainly the soils are different, but just the climate alone is going to give us some different characteristics. So we would expect that, yeah, and I'm not going to tell you what we should expect. How about that? Let's pour this one, and I'll stop talking for another minute, and we'll see what we find.
So somebody just asked where the Russian River was. It's just due east of kind of where that little arrow was pointing. So it is, it's off the coast of the Sonoma coast, of course. It's just off, there we go. So it's towards the Napa side just a little bit, but not far at all. But the difference is, well, there is no difference. I don't know exactly why they asked the question, but it's just geographically, it's just due east of the Sonoma Valley, where that little thing is pointing.
Yeah. Okay, so there are two wines here. I'm not really sure what everyone has. Which one do you have, Dana?
I have the Sonoma Coast.
Hey, this one's Monterey. I also have
Sweet.
the Sonoma Coast.
I would love to taste these side by side.
Yep.
Just simply to pick up the difference in them.
I'll tell you about it.
Okay. Awesome.
So I just automatically based on color, there's a difference in the color. I don't know that you can see that,
Mm-hmm.
but certainly,
Oh,
yeah, there's a difference in the color of these, and the Monterey is a little bit lighter.
Yes, I noticed that when I poured this Pinot, it was a little darker than I expected for a Pinot, but not outside of the range.
Yeah, I think it has to do with that cold soaking that they do.
Mm-hmm.
So, what are people's thoughts on these? I'm not sure which one they ended up getting, but. Taste at least 3 times before you make a decision. Good idea.
Not a bad idea at all.
Because your palate has to sort of acclimate, and it does, once you stop and think about it for a minute. So good idea.
Yep.
I know that we are 1 minute from out of time, and Haven
Yes.
has said we can stick on for a few more minutes. If you need to go, I understand that. Anybody that's
I was late, so I'm good.
we're gonna just stick for a few more minutes and at least taste through this one and give a last minute thank you and all that sort of stuff. But my first Pinot Noir, enjoying it. Good. Two that like it, one that loves it. Tasting pepper. Yep.
Yep.
So what you would expect is on the cooler climate one, the Sonoma one, you would expect to get the cherries, but the cherries might be black cherries, the really dark cherries. And you would expect to get things like tea and tobacco and things like that. Whereas the warmer climate one, you might get cherries as well, but the cherries would be more like bright red cherries or cherry candy or something like that. So you'd still get the same characteristics, they would just manifest themselves a little bit differently. And you'd still get the earthy tones, you know, those Burgundian styles are very earthy, but in the Sonoma one, you'd get like tea and coffee kind of earthy notes, whereas in the Monterey one, you might get more mushroom and that sort of thing. So they're still sitting within the same categories, but they manifest themselves a little bit differently. And a lot of it has to do with the climate and of course the soils that go along with that, even though they're fairly close together.
Mm-hmm. Ben, vanilla or oak, which one do you have? The Sonoma Coast or the Monterey?
Certainly it's going to spend some time in a barrel and you're going to get those notes from that. Both of them would get some of that.
Mm-hmm. I have the Sonoma Coast and I get just a touch of vanilla with a kind of a campfirey smokiness to it.
Oh, I like that.
Almost a cranberry soda. And there's some earthiness there. I wouldn't go so far as to say mushroom, but it's definitely kind of just earthy.
Yeah, I think the Monterey one is a little more on the mushroomy side.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
We have both. Okay.
Awesome.
Excellent.
Serving temperature in my mind is a little personal. I know people who like their white wines a little warmer because it brings out all the flavors in it and all the aromatics. I tend to like my red wines a little chilled. So I would say, you know what you like, and I would chill or warm your wines to your liking.
Yeah, I think that if they're too cold, then it's a great way to hide flaws. You miss
That's
a
true.
lot of character, which sometimes
That's
is
true.
good if it's a flaw, but
That's true.
yeah.
And it's also fun to like maybe start with wine that's a little too cold and kind of watch it develop as it warms up.
There you go.
What is my job? You're jealous? Well,
No kidding. We are all jealous of Dana. Oh my gosh.
don't be jealous. I actually work in the administrative offices here. So I'm an accountant, but I'm an accountant for a winery. So it's not that bad.
And she also has her next level of somm, and I've seen her saber champagne bottle. And yeah, so she's making it sound like she pushes pencils, but she does not. Maybe occasionally, but
I do that too. How about that?
fair enough. How much time do you spend in that wine room that's behind you?
Not enough.
We are just accounting for the bottles.
Well, come on. We're open 7 days a week.
Thank you all for joining us. We have really had a lot of fun putting all of this together. I wanted to just sort of leave you with our contact information so that if we sort of scrolled through and missed everybody's questions, or you had other questions that occurred to you, we at Carolina have a Wine and Beverage Institute that if you're here in the local area and you want to come to one of our tastings, they're usually on Tuesday evenings when we get back to normal, and you can find all those listings on the McCutcheon House website. But in the meantime, here's Dana's email, here's my email. If you have any questions or any thoughts, we would love to hear from you. Thank you so
Absolutely.
much. Happy 4th of July, everybody. Stay safe. And yeah, now that you have these wines at home, no need to go out. You can definitely stay safe.
Absolutely.
David, thank you so much for this. This was fun.
Thank you so much, Sandy and Dana. We loved having you today.
Absolutely.
Before y'all log off, any participants, if you would put, if you had more than one person tasting along with you, just so we have a ballpark of how many people got to join us today, that would be great. Thank you to everyone who's joining us as well. We'll send out a post-event survey, which I'm sure Sandy and Dana will get raving reviews on. So, and thank you both again for being here. I know I definitely learned a lot today. So.
It was our pleasure. Absolutely.
Absolutely.
Thanks, Dana. Thank you,
Absolutely.
David.
Cheers.
Bye, everybody.